Fritz Weatherby's Town History is brought to you by Tanks Incorporated, building quality products for a better environment. Manufacturer of Plasteel Elutron double-walled underground storage tanks, U-Fuel above-ground fueling systems, oil water separators and water treatment equipment. Tanks Incorporated, proud sponsor of Fritz Weatherby's Town History. The Nees Companies, Massachusetts Electric, Narragansett Electric, Granite State Electric, and Nantucket Electric, delivering safe, reliable electricity to great New England towns for nearly a century. The farm families who own Cabot Creamery, makers of a full line of dairy products, most notably naturally aged Vermont cheddar cheeses, winner of every major award for taste, are pleased to sponsor Fritz Weatherby's Town History, and by a generous grant for Mr. Les Hubbard. And now, Fritz Weatherby's Town History.
It is a small town, less than 3,000 people, tucked away in the New Hampshire countryside. But don't be fooled. This place is full of history. Louisa May Alcott lived here back in the 1850s. She and her family, in a house that still exists. And nowadays, the American filmmaker Ken Burns lives here and has his studios and offices here. Behind me is where Louisa May Alcott and her sisters used to put on plays in the attic. And it is in that house that James Michener wrote his great American novel, Hawaii. Much of it is based in this town. Jerusha, his principal character, came from this town in the novel. And he says there was a village church, glistening white in its pre-revolutionary splendor, the massive houses, the giant elms, the marvelous green common. This is Walpole, and Walpole is the subject of today's town history. America's small towns, not grand cities, but rather places tucked away in memory. This program is about these places and the people who live and have lived here. Walpole is named for this man, Sir Robert Walpole, England's first Prime Minister. Many towns in New England were named for English peers because their charters were granted by the Crown. Sir Bobby, of course, never visited here. The town is located on the Connecticut River, 38 miles from the Massachusetts border. And as you probably know, rivers were the highways of the nation in those days, and this was about as far into the wilderness as you could get then. The stopping places on the river in the early days each had a fort. Walpole was the site of Fort Number 3. The Native Americans of the time came regularly to this spot. Because of the natural waterfall, it was an excellent place to catch salmon and other fish. The town itself was chartered in 1752. That's a couple dozen years before the Revolutionary War. By the way, a guy named Ben Bellows got the original charter. He couldn't name the place Bellows because the king called it Walpole. The town across the river was, however, named after him. This is Bellows Falls, Vermont. So, as you can see, this is an historic place. Many of the buildings in this town are over 200 years old. This is the old Walpole Academy School building. It is now the Town Historical Society. And the day we visited here, they were delivering a new acquisition, a painting.
And carry it just like that. And watch out when we go through the door.
Deborah Hill presented this painting to the Society. She and her husband, Howard, purchased it from a local estate sale.
Looking at this painting, I realized that the life of this child was so very different in the days when that child was growing up then.
Now, the subject is a child who grew up in Walpole in the 19th century, but as of the time we did this program, no one seemed to know the name of the child, nor for that matter of the painter. Our two guides this day at the Historical Society were Ginny Putnam and Merv Stevens. Ginny is the Society librarian, and Merv is the president of the organization.
Isn't that fabulous, though?
Merv gave us a quick tour of the second floor.
Well, most of this stuff is from collections that people give us, that people find in their barns. We buy them at auctions, or people come from out of town, they give us collections. This is bust of Lincoln that was found in a local barn.
Oh, he's wonderful.
Right.
That's full size, too.
Right.
Oh, look here.
Yeah, these sunglasses.
Shades of the past. Those are the hippest sunglasses I have ever seen.
Right,
These
Nick.
are all in style now.
Right,
The same glasses are back. The stuff you've got on, that's really
Right.
old. Those are old men's glasses. I used to have those kind of glasses.
They're coming back in style, I'll tell you.
I don't have them anymore.
Well, and this was dug up out of an old agricultural field. They were plowing down along the Connecticut River. He never says a word. He always just sits there and grins at everybody as we walk by.
The skull, you may notice, has a bullet hole in its top. And we are about to tell you the story. Back in 1755, a guy named John Kilburn, along with his wife and son, were working their farm just north of the town when they looked up to see hundreds of Indians surrounding them. The warriors were led by a tall Native American called Philip, and John Kilburn knew Philip. You see, Philip had been to the Kilburn farm earlier that year, and John Kilburn had treated him very well. But Philip was a spy, and he had returned to kill all the settlers in the valley. And then they burned the cornfield and fired on the cabin. But John Kilburn fired back, and as luck would have it, killed Philip. Philip was buried right there on the spot in the field, and the tribe retired and never attacked Walpole again. John Kilburn, by the way, is buried in the Walpole Cemetery. A monument marks the spot, and here's his grave. Now about the skull. In 1888, this skull was plowed up in a field just south of the Kilburn farm. Many thought it was Philip. If it is, he had been in the wet ground out there for 133 years. So I leave it to you.
We're not beholden to Boston. We're not a commuting suburb to anywhere. We are still an isolated, simple town in which we were reflecting on the world.
This is architect David Howard. He lives here in Walpole. David lectures professionally on the effect architecture has on the social environment, and one of his prime examples is the New England Village.
You'll discover to your amazement that this entire village, going to its edges, is only 165 acres. And within that 165 acres, we have housing for 1,000 people. We have 4 churches, a very important part of New England. The necessity, the understanding that that there should be competition for the souls of men. This is the great evolution of New English thought. And no single thing should dominate your life. Religion shouldn't dominate, business shouldn't dominate, culture shouldn't dominate. There are all these various things that are part of life. What we're seeing within this 160 acres is a true example of a whole world, a world in which young people live in it, old people, bad people, good people, rich people, not so rich people, okay? And it's still, the extraordinary thing about Walpole, and it's worth coming and doing this and flying over and looking at it, within this 160 acres, it's still pretty much the way it was then. That's the great feature of New England. They did this without legislation. They did it without forcing other people to do it, because that was the most important part. A group is a group because it agrees to be a group, not because it's forced to be a group.
Do you mean to say that the fact that every one of these houses here on the square is painted white with dark shutters where they have shutters is not from an ordinance? This was done
no
because...
ordinance. And the interesting thing is probably you really become suspicious if the entire town was all painted white, because I've always used it in my lectures. Every town has someone who's pink, in a sense, or yellow, and they might be pink or yellow for a generation or two, and that's a reflection of a group. One of the great things, again, about New England is they were conscious of building units that had a great deal of flexibility. There could be an individual old maid living there, renting out rooms that could be turned into a gracious, wealthy person's home. It could evolve into a bed and breakfast. It could be a doctor's office. One of my favorite buildings, of course, to visit is to go see Ken Burns' studio. And here's a building that has no distinguishing features that tells you they're making major movies there, and they've taken a house and made it into a movie-making facility. The element of American society happening right here. I mean, this is a perfect example of if you sat here and read the preamble to the Constitution or the Bill of Rights and looked at this while you're doing it, you would find the core of American ideas right in front of you.
Jeez, I want a marching band!
And this is my lecture, you see? There's the town hall, there's the Congregational Church, you see? This is the common.
You know, just a few yards down from the Walpole Common, walking distance, is this beautiful home, which once belonged to Stephen Roe Bradley, who was a Revolutionary War general, and it was Senator Bradley who introduced a bill making the American flag have 15 stars and 15 stripes. Did you know the American flag once had 15 stripes? Well, it did, and that was because Kentucky and Vermont had been admitted to the Union. And it was this flag with 15 stripes that flew over Fort McHenry during the War of 1812 and inspired Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner.
We really have a conceit, those who live in the city, that nothing really goes on in the provinces. We're aware of the famous New Yorker cover that places nothing between New York and San Francisco and then China. But in fact, all around this country is where we grow the talent of our country and where it finds as vibrant expression as in the great cities. We need both. Walpole, because of its beauty, because of its situation, because of the way it was laid out, because of its history, I think it begins to attract people who are curious. And that curiosity expresses itself in great chocolates, great orchards, and great writing, and we hope great filmmaking.
Here in Walpole, Ken created his Civil War documentary, as well as most of his other films that have become a part of the nation's consciousness. And what is the reaction of this small town to this man with a worldwide reputation?
I've always said that all of my so-called celebrity and fame, plus 50 cents, gets me a cup of coffee in Walpole, New Hampshire.
Historical Society librarian Ginny Putnam.
This telephone booth was used here in town, down on Westminster Street in what we called the telephone building.
Amazing, but this switchboard was in use here in Walpole well into the 1950s.
And here's an old telephone directory, and I see my husband's name in here. This was a stand-up desk that was in the Buffum store here in town in 1816.
And what did Buffum sell?
Groceries, food, and general, general products and so forth. Back in 1816, they sold everything. And a lot of the ledgers still here and in these cubby holes, I call them, were used then. This was also a repository for everything else. Now this big volume here, I can't take it out, but this was from an old Davis drugstore. It has all of the receipts, prescription forms, and everything.
Wow.
It's unbelievable, and it must be almost a foot thick. These are copies out of some of the ledgers.
Oh, I see. So that you can see what.
Yes, without
see
opening
exactly
the books.
What prices have we there?
Very nice prices.
All right.
Here's 2 pounds of nails, 22 cents. Mm-hmm. The charge of making 2 gates, $3.50. Oh. See, they did everything. This building was built for an academy for young ladies and young gentlemen, and they went to school here. It was like a high school, almost like a finishing school. And then in 1853, it was given to the town.
Was the town bigger back then?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. The one-room schoolhouses were very small. There were not only Walpole students that went here, but students from surrounding towns came here to go. And they also had some of these large homes on Prospect Hill and up and down Main Street were used as boarding homes for the school. Okay. So they did have out-of-towners come here. I don't remember from reading the different brochures how many students they had here at any one time.
You weren't a student here?
Oh, definitely not. That was before my time.
Now, wait a minute. You said your husband was a student here.
My husband was a student here. He graduated.
Well, it wasn't before his time. Aren't you of an age?
There is so much stuff here in the Historical Society and nowhere near enough time to see it all. But let's crowd in a few short takes with Ginny and Merv.
This is Abel Bellows. Well, Abel was the grandson of the founder of Walpole, and he lived from 1776 to 1837.
Table and chairs made by Holland Burt. Now, that was probably made in the middle 1800s.
It's very
pretty.
That's very odd. I mean,
yep.
That's a unique
Yes,
design. I have never seen a back that did that.
This was on top of the flagpole on the town common.
This is an old water main that was dug up when they redid a street recently. Isn't that something? The water used to go through, it was hollowed out.
A square piece of wood, and it was hollowed out, and they said, I wonder why it didn't rot away under the ground like that.
Well, it did.
Oh. This is
a buggy carriage for twins. It's of Molly Bellows. And if you go upstairs into the case that has all of the cloth,
we did that.
You will see, and so that's the nice connection to it.
Bet she aged beautifully, because that's a beautiful face.
This is Molly Bellows' ball gown that her uncle brought her back from France.
Whoa.
And that's in the portrait.
This is Dutchie Perrin. Dutchie is the Historical Society's expert on their collection of clothing and accessories.
Notice how tiny the waists are.
Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Well, that's kind of nice, yeah. I think it's a real sunbonnet. Is that hand done?
Definitely.
All hand.
Tucked.
All hand stitched.
Cotton.
Yeah, and you know, that's as fresh now as it was the day it was made. There's
It is.
hardly a thing wrong with this little stain on the thing. Ooh, what's that? Oh,
This is an ivory.
That's ivory and hand carved? Is that
Isn't
hand
that
carved?
beautiful?
Look at that. That's not appliqué on, is it?
No, not at all.
That's carved.
Carved tassels.
It is. It's a cap.
It is
That's
a
what it's meant
beaded-
for. And it should
Oh, you know what
somewhere.
it might have been as a hair cover
That's yeah.
for a,
A snood.
yeah.
Want a cookie?
I think I'll pass.
The town of Walpole is located here generally for two reasons. One is because of the water power from the Bellows Falls, and the other is because of the rich farmland here in the Connecticut River Valley. And as a matter of fact, there are still a great many working farms here in Walpole.
Coming out.
This is farmer Robert Graves.
What time's your day start?
Oh, starts at 6 o'clock in the morning and is over at 7:30 at night. We might take an hour or two during the day to rest up.
How long's this farm been in your family?
Ever since 1761,
It's about the time the town was founded.
1752, the town was founded, right.
On this plot of land here, or?
On right on this land, right here.
Well, always farmers.
Always farmers. John Graves that came here in 1761, and he was a shipbuilder in Saybrook, Connecticut. He bought this land from Colonel Bellows. Bellows had a grant from the King of England, and he owned all of Walpole at one time.
Well, I see in the town history a lot of Indian raids and stuff. Did your family ever have any?
Not that I've ever heard of.
Uh-huh.
I told a story the other night about the Indians, but it wasn't true, so I can't tell.
Well, let's hear it anyhow. What is the?
No, I don't want to say that. But Walpole has got more agriculture than any other town or city in the state of New Hampshire. We got 7 dairy farms. We got the headquarters for the biggest poultry business in the country, and we got 2 farm machinery dealers.
It's real difficult staying in business. The dairy farms. I mean, they've been going out of business left and right.
Well, there used to be
30 years.
There used to be 35 farms in town, and back in the 1960s. Now there's 7.
But how much do these cows average for milking like this?
We like to keep them averaging around 55 pounds.
Milk is measured in pounds.
Yeah.
And a pound of milk is about how much?
2 pounds to the quart. That's a cow right there that gave 24 pounds, 24.6.
6, huh? How long you been doing with the automatic milking machine?
I think they put the milk machines in 1942.
And before that,
Milk by hand.
can you do that?
Yep, used to be able to.
Tell me how they used to get the milk to town.
Way back in the early 30s and 20s and whatever, there was a milk train that always went to Boston every day, and they'd take turns, the farmers would, picking up the next farmer's milk and so on and so forth, and with the horses, and take it down to the milk train, put it on a little stand, and the train would stop there and just roll it right into the car and take it down to Boston. I can't remember that. I'm not that old, you know.
This family has farmed this land for 240 years. Granddaughter Kate and grandson Sam make it 10 generations of Graves that have lived here.
Farming is a good life.
Louisa May Alcott. About the time of the Civil War, the Alcotts came here to Walpole. As we noted earlier, the girls put on amateur theatricals in the attic of this building. Not as fancy as the movies might have it, just an attic. Nowadays, the floor has been broken up into rooms. But for a number of summers and some winters as well, the Alcotts lived in this house, now an apartment building. Louisa's mother's brother owned the property. Bronson Alcott was Louisa May's father, and according to the Walpole town history, a very lazy man. People around here didn't think much of him. As for his daughters, this from the town history.
His 4 daughters were rather attractive girls, somewhat large in bone and flabbily plump. I know my brother, Dr. Alfred Hosmer, rather a bright man, always used to speak of them as watery vegetables.
The reader is Bill Perrin, local history teacher.
Lizzie, the 3rd daughter, died here of consumption, I think after a long illness. I can remember little about her, but she had the reputation of being a very sweet girl.
Yes, Walpole, New Hampshire, not Concord, Massachusetts, is the town where Lizzie died. Lizzie was, of course, the model for the character Beth in Little Women.
Miss Louisa Alcott was a great novelist in her way, having almost unequaled power in describing the character and characteristics of the people she met in her ordinary life.
Well, our show has come to its end. In these few minutes, we've had just about enough time to scratch the surface, to show you some things about the history and people of this remarkable place. About the Indian Raid and Louisa May Alcott, about Ken Burns and James Michener, and the reasons New England villages were created in the first place. And we hope we have piqued your interest about Walpole, New Hampshire. If we've done that, well, then we've done what we started out to do.
An invitation, please log on to our website. Here you'll find more information about this town history special, and you'll have a chance to give us your opinion, make suggestions for any future programs.
America's future is in its dreams. America's past is in the town history.